jump in. We'll do.
Because I'm so anxiously waiting
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Okay, so welcoming. I don't know if this is his radio debut. He is the first candidate we've ever had, and he's an interesting guy. He really is. He's running for sheriff, but he's never worked for the sheriff's department or in law enforcement. Jason Smith, running for sheriff of Washington Parish. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. So you're on the campaign trail right now, right?
I am on the campaign trail.
How is everything so far?
No, it's been good. You know, I got out of the Marine Corps to avoid politics, and here I am getting into politics. It's not something I ever wanted to do. I certainly didn't have a lifelong ambition to enter politics. I spent just about all of my Marine Corps career with a low opinion of politics and politicians in general.
Yeah.
But you can only see things go a certain way for so long, and you look around and you think, hey, somebody's got to do something about this.
Right.
And I'm qualified.
Yeah, even that word politics, it bothers me. It's a Greek word, you know. It means pile of ticks, pile of bloodsuckers is what it means. But you're coming at this from, you're a butcher, right? I mean, isn't that right?
No, I'm a farmer.
Farmer, okay.
Yeah, so when I retired from the Marine Corps, I moved back to take over my family's farm. We have a farm in Mount Hermon. We raise black Angus cattle and sheep. So,
see, when I hear Angus, I go right to the steak.
That's right. Well, no, so that really is the change that we made. You know, I recognize that if we wanted to keep this farm going and not go the way that other family farms have gone, the way of the dinosaur, that we had to change some of the things that we were doing.
Yeah.
We had to get away from this commodity production model that everyone is kind of locked into. So in my last job in the Marine Corps, I did a lot of research and started looking at different ways to do things, and so we decided we were going to sell meat directly to customers in restaurants. And so that's what we did starting in about 2019.
Okay. So never worked for the sheriff's department?
Never worked for the sheriff's office.
Ever work Franklinton PD, Bogalusa PD, anything like that?
I have no law enforcement, officially no law enforcement experience.
Wow. Okay. And he's running for sheriff. Now, I just got some we kind of dig around. We try to do a little investigative journalism here. Jordan has an obsession with Vice. She thinks she's a Vice reporter, but they don't have any of those anymore. So, but people, like, your name has come up with, so the new billboard that somebody posted on the side of the building where you got, like, the bail bonds office across from the courthouse. And it's the Who Killed Donna Arsenault case.
Right.
So are you familiar with that case at all?
I'm familiar with the case. I first heard about the case right after it happened. There was a lady that we went to church with that mentioned it during prayer concerns, that she said we need to pray for the family because this friend of hers was murdered and they're classifying it as a suicide. So you're sitting in a small church and you hear somebody start talking about murder, your ears kind of perk up. I didn't know Donna. I don't know anything about the details of the case, really. I've since found out about it. There's a lot of people that think that we're behind the billboard because it's an election year.
Yeah.
And it reflects negatively on the investigation that was done from the outset.
Right.
But the people that were responsible for it actually contacted me a couple days after the billboard went up and apologized because they felt like, based off the rumors that they had heard, that it was reflecting negatively on us.
Well, see, and that's why we're here today. This is what I enjoy doing about the media. When, as a member of the media, we could take all the rumors, all the hearsay, all the word on the street, and we could dispel them here today. All right, because that's why we're really here, and that's what people told me when I was inquiring as to the billboard. And this was an unsolved homicide. It was ruled a homicide from 2017, and they're saying, "Oh, Jason Smith," and that's the word on the street. He put those up because he's running against the sheriff.
No, really, I think that your motivation for dispelling rumors is exactly what I told the people that were responsible for the billboard. I'm not behind it, but I fully support it because we want to get to the truth. You know, this, when you think about this, the cliche is the missing white woman syndrome, that if something happens to a white lady in the United States, the news shuts down and that's all anybody talks about. And yet here we have a high-profile case that was classified as a suicide initially. Then the classification was changed to a homicide. There seems to be no curiosity about why that classification was made initially or why the investigation has broken down. And so you think if the sheriff's office can't devote the energy to prosecute this case and investigate this case properly from the outset, when it's such a high-profile case, well, we've got no chance of getting our four-wheelers back. You understand what I'm saying?
Whoa.
Very touche.
Some hearts just skipped a beat there. Hey, getting the four-wheelers back.
Yeah.
Dang, okay. So, and what about your critics who say you're just running for sheriff, Jason Smith, because you're doing it out of spite? You're just spiteful.
Yeah, it's an interesting version of Stockholm Syndrome when we think that we're somehow taking something from politicians. You know, the fact is that the incumbent has been sheriff for 12 years. He was tax assessor for 18 years previous to that. When I become sheriff and when I'm elected in October, he still will have been the tax assessor for 18 years, and he still will have been the sheriff for 12 years. I'm not taking anything away from him. He will enjoy a very sizable retirement at the public taxpayers' expense. You know, those are the rules.
For both jobs, right?
For both jobs, and I'm not holding that against him.
Right.
But to say that he's a victim, like I'm taking something from him, the job is not his. The job is ours. He is a hired employee. And we're not looking at what he's done over the previous 30 years in elected politics. We're trying to figure out who is best suited to handle the challenges of the next 4 years.
Right.
That's what we're worried about. And we've got some significant challenges ahead of us over the next 4 years in Washington Parish.
Yeah. See, Jordan, in Louisiana, if you get elected to any public office, I think, like parish-wide level, or is it may be all, but you get a nice little retirement from the state, like forever. I mean, and if you have two jobs, well, there's that. What about people that say, you're not even from Washington Parish, Jason Smith?
There are people that say that. In my birth certificate does say Baton Rouge.
Oh, no.
I know. It's criminal, isn't it?
The truthers are out there, man.
No, but the reality is that my father was born in Mount Hermon, grew up in Mount Hermon, graduated from Mount Hermon High School. And when he got out of the Marine Corps and he and my mother moved back and tried to make a living on the dairy, at that time it was difficult, much like it is now. The state police were opening a helicopter squadron in Baton Rouge, and since my father was a pilot in the Marine Corps, we moved to Baton Rouge. So I was born in Baton Rouge, graduated from high school in Baton Rouge. When my grandfather passed away, my parents moved back out to Mount Hermon. But by that point, I was already at LSU and in the Marine Corps. I met my wife between my first and second deployments to Iraq. She graduated from Mount Hermon High School. And the reality is that when we were going to get out of the Marine Corps, we chose to come back to Washington Parish. I've owned property there since I was in my 20s.
Wow.
My home of record has been there. And really, it's not about where you're from. It's about what you can offer. And I would stack my family's resume up against anybody's with respect to what we've offered since we've been back since 2016.
And you'll have to excuse my co-host. She's from North Carolina. I'm sorry. I almost said Virginia.
Born and raised in Virginia Beach, and then I ended up I graduated high school from the Outer Banks, North Carolina, Roanoke Island, Lost Colony.
So very familiar with both Virginia and North Carolina.
Me too. I love North Carolina.
North Carolina is beautiful.
It is.
Beaches, mountains, seasons. It's wonderful.
Yeah. The leaves change colors.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they do.
Ours changed colors now because we haven't had any rain in 6 weeks.
Yeah. There's brown.
So Mount Hermon, though, you're referring for Mount Hermon. I mean, there's no reason to stop there except for the best damn fried chicken in the world in Mount Hermon. Ooh, what is that? What is that shop? Brooks's. Oh man.
So if you're at Brooks's and after you eat some chicken, you want to come out to the farm and get some beef and lamb. You head 4 miles to the east. We're exactly 4 miles to the east on the left on 1055.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that sounds like
might take you up on that.
That sounds like Washington Parish, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so he can run for office. It's okay, y'all. But what about, all the time you see this, especially in Louisiana, you see the sheriff will have like his deputy sheriff or whatever, his right-hand man, and they always run for office after he leaves. It's kind of the Huey Long, OK Allen kind of thing happening there. But a lot of people get promised jobs, that probably shouldn't have these jobs, working for the sheriff's office. Let me ask you right now, have you promised anybody any jobs?
No, I haven't promised anybody any jobs. In fact, I've actually lost support from 2 people that wanted me to promise jobs to people in principle, not even names.
Okay.
And the reality is I can't hold it against them because they're viewing it through the lens of what just about every sheriff has ever done. You promise jobs. There's no constitutional authority for the sheriff's office. It's just that position. So the sheriff is free to make the office as big or as small as he wants. And 50 or 60 years ago, when places like Washington Parish were much more insular, maybe it made sense to bring in guys that were loyal to you. But my experience in the Marine Corps is just the opposite of that.
Yeah.
You work with the people that are there first. And I'm about building a culture. We need to change the culture within the sheriff's department and within law enforcement in general. And you can't do that if you're promising people the jobs just because you think they might be more loyal to you. Yeah. And you think about what the implications of that are for the deputies that are there, that they're not going to be willing to do their jobs unless they're friends with the boss. It's a mentality that we're trying to change, and it's hard. You can't hold it against somebody because they can't see what's possible. They've never seen it done in principle, so you got to put it into practice.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen, especially in Calcasieu Parish. I started noticing that they were buying all these former refurbished, refabricated military vehicles for the sheriff's department. Again, this is a job whose main duty as sheriff is, I guess, peace officer. You almost, especially like Franklinton, that's what all you need. A peace officer, really, right? And then to do the taxes and to serve papers and things like that. I get that, but to have a military vehicle. I mean, does Franklinton, does Washington Parish have like military grade equipment?
Yeah, so they've got. I think they've got an MRAP sitting in the motor pool.
What?
Yeah, the reality, though, is that they're suffering from the same problems that law enforcement across the country are suffering from. We have overly militarized law enforcement across the country at the expense of people. We used to call, you mentioned it, we used to call police officers officers of the peace. We don't call them that anymore. We call them law enforcement officers. And the way that we train law enforcement officers is completely antithetical to the way that we ought to be focusing on keeping the peace in the community. We distill all of these negative things that have ever happened to any police officer across the country, and we present it to these guys going through their entry-level training as if it happens on a regular Wednesday.
Right.
So their mentality is when they go out into the community that they think that they are at war with the people in the community, and it's not the case.
Right.
The thing that I can bring to the table is that you can talk about, if you want to be a tough guy and walk around with your bulletproof vest and the sunglasses on the back of your head and go to lunch.
Oakley's.
Yeah, I was going to say Oakley's.
No, you know what I'm saying. That is the stereotype. You go to lunch in packs of 5 and 6 and you don't talk to anybody and you ride around in your police cruiser like you're in the space shuttle that you're not going to get out of. I mean, you can convince yourself that you're at war with the community, but you're not going to tell me that. I spent 22 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. I was in Fallujah. I was in the initial invasion of Iraq. You're not going to convince me of this. I think that, and I can communicate those ideas in such a way that law enforcement guys are going to be receptive to it. Because ultimately, if you talk to any law enforcement guy, if he's worth his salt, he's going to tell you the reason why he joined law enforcement. It has nothing to do with the money. It has to do with what value he can provide to the community. He wanted to bring peace to the community. But then the way that they're trained and the way that they're incentivized, they lose sight of that. We can get back to what it's supposed to be, especially in a place like Washington Parish where 8,000 votes will carry the election.
Yeah,
you can't change in a place like Orleans Parish. You can't change in a place, maybe like even St. Tammany. There's just too many people, too much money. The system is just kind of on its own. But in Washington Parish, we have a chance to be an example for other places to say, no, this is how it could be. This is how it should be. All we got to do is take advantage of the opportunity.
Right, well, and let's focus on law enforcement just for a little bit. What is the state of law enforcement in Washington Parish right now? I mean, guys, first of all, I didn't know, is there a Franklinton PD? Because I've never seen them before. Yeah,
so I think one of the other issues is organizational, in the sense that here in Washington Parish, we have about 50,000 residents according to the latest census. But we have 3 separate law enforcement, well, 4 if you include Varnado. We've got 4 separate law enforcement agencies: Franklinton PD, Bogalusa PD, and the Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
The Sheriff's Office has no responsibility for the running of the Franklinton PD or the Bogalusa PD, and that's not even really what I'm suggesting.
Right.
But the sheriff is clearly the best person to be the example, to be the relationship builder, to be the person that can kind of manage how law enforcement operates across. But to do that, he's got to have good relationships with the municipal governments of Franklinton and Bogalusa. He's got to work with the mayors, work with the city councils, he's got to work with the police chiefs.
Right, because I got to tell you, all we're hearing out of Bogalusa nowadays is shootings, violence.
Yeah, there is, I've said this and I'll say it now again, is that there is no bigger concern in Washington Parish than the security situation in Bogalusa.
Yeah.
And currently we have a sheriff's department that's sitting on the sidelines and saying, well, the crime that is happening in the parish, most of the violent crime, is happening in Bogalusa, and therefore it's not really our responsibility because they have a mayor, they have a city council, and they have a police force that's supposed to be handling all that. But the sheriff, because of, I think you mentioned this earlier, he collects taxes and he's the chief law enforcement. The sheriff's office is the crossroads for all things governmental. He's got to have good relationships with businesses,
you'd think so.
DA, parish president, parish government, all those things. Not to mention the supporting and adjacent law enforcement agencies that have a toe or maybe a foot or maybe a whole leg in Bogalusa. You're talking about state police, DA, ATF, FBI. The sheriff has got to be able to build relationships and kind of convince everybody that their priorities really need to be focused on keeping the peace in Bogalusa. Because if Bogalusa continues on the path that it's going, and of course we're dodging bullets on the streets in broad daylight.
Literally,
Bogalusa,
literally.
Washington Parish's future is going to be negatively affected.
Okay. Jason Smith, he's running for sheriff of Washington Parish. Jordan Dalton, any questions for our guest candidate today?
I think we covered everything.
Well, we have to publicly offer the same time that we've given him today to your opponent, to the incumbent sheriff, and you are more than welcome. You and your people could come on the air, or just you, and you just come down here and let's clear the air on the air.
That'd be great.
And Jason Smith, would you ever be open to a debate? And I'll tell you this is one thing I miss, and I just, they don't do it enough anymore, because all you got to do nowadays is raise money and you win. That's it.
Yeah.
But I want a real debate. I want to see candidates go at each other with, hard truths and facts, and, I want to watch people squirm.
I think getting two people, in the room together, it wouldn't be an even thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's kind of like if you have one person saying another thing, one person saying another thing, and it's like you're not in the same room together, you get them in the same room together. I think that's important.
No, I think that's the problem with our society today is everyone just talks past each other. I'll do a debate with anybody at any time. You give me an hour's notice and I can be down here from Mount Herman.
I just think that's something that's missing from
politics.
politics.
I think that's right. Yeah. And then these candidate forums turn into some version of kabuki theater where it's all staged, it's very sanitized, there's no interaction.
Right.
We don't really seek truth. We're just looking to promote whatever sound bites that we have.
Right. Okay. Well, and literally sell soap. That's what we're doing right now. Yeah. We have soap. The term soap opera actually comes from old-timey radio. But if we could utilize our radio powers for good, y'all, I'm just saying we could have both candidates in at the same time one day. If you're open to this, I'm open to it. And you could actually hear them in real time.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing today. So, and I guess it doesn't matter what team you play for. Does it matter in the small town like races with political party affiliation?
No, I don't think it does, because the party affiliation at the national level gets people really ramped up so they can raise money like you talked about. But at the local level, you're voting for the person. You have the opportunity to meet people, you have the opportunity to get to know people, and you have the opportunity to hold them accountable if what they're telling you doesn't turn out to be the truth later on.
Right. Okay, and anything you want to end with? Any last final thought you want to have today before we shuffle you out of the buildings?
No, I just think that we have an opportunity. If you think that Washington Parish is behind the times, whether it's 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is, that's an opportunity. The job of the sheriff has a huge influence on the daily lives of people in Washington Parish. And we have a chance to fix what's going on, but we've got to be able to take that chance and not fall into the same routine of electing the same people and expecting different results.
Okay. Well, good luck to you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we'll see you out on the campaign trail, I'm sure. And if we're open to it, we'll make sure that, if we're open that day, we'll do the debate.
Yeah.
We'll actually let y'all in the studio. And Jordan would have some questions for you then. Nothing else, Jordan? Nothing good for the day? Okay. We're going to go. Keep listening now. We've been visiting with Jason Smith. And your website, again, is it Jason Smith for Sheriff?
It is sheriffjasonsmith.com.
Sheriff Jason Smith. All right, very good. You're kind of assuming the election is going in your favor.
Why would I assume anything else?
SheriffJasonSmith.com. There it is. Okay, so keep listening now. It's TC and J in the AM right here only on Cat Country 98.9. Little TC and J. I like the story we got going on so far this morning.
Yeah.
First of all, our guest, Jason Smith, running for sheriff of Washington Parish, it's got a great movie story. I'm going to pitch you this real quick, all right? Former Marine, right? Turns farmer.
Yeah.
Runs for sheriff.
Yeah.
Changes the culture.
Yeah.
That's a hit. That's a hit movie
Definitely
right there. So, Jason, we get any of the movie rights just for bringing this to public? Do we get to play ourselves in the movie of your political campaign?
Yeah, we haven't casted all the parts yet, but you'll be considered.
But who would play you in your movie?
Who would play me? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Bradley Cooper, huh?
You're too kind.
Here, I'm going to give you some soap, too, on the way, in case you smell like Bradley Cooper.
Oh, man.
So, isn't it true, and if you're just joining us just now, our special political guest, and again, we are extending equal time to there's 4 candidates, right, for sheriff?
There are.
Washington Parish. So, to all of you, hey, come on into the radio station. What do you say, guys? The water's warm. It should be nice. But you're only running for one term, is that correct? Or is this what I'm hearing on the streets? And we're really trying to dispel all the rumors, gossip, and hearsay.
No, people have asked me that, or they've heard that. And I think that started because in some of my early conversations with people, they asked me how many terms I was running for, and the answer was I will stay there as long as I'm adding value. Now, the leadership problems that I think that exist in the sheriff's department, I don't think it would take 4 years to fix, and I think that's where that rumor started.
Okay.
Now, there's some things that go on beyond just the leadership issues. You know, we've got problems with the jail, we've got problems with the 911 communication center. Consolidated 911. So there's some longer term things that the sheriff is in a position to help address for the benefit of the parish that will take longer than 4 years. But I think we need to get away from this idea of terms, and focus on the result.
Right. Nobody really. Well, how many terms are you gonna run for? Well, I don't know, 3, maybe 4. Maybe 5. That's how it is in Louisiana.
Well, I like that you're also, I like this a lot because it's like, you know, you're not exactly coming in and, you know, I think if we're focusing on how many terms, that's taking away from like what needs to be done, as you're saying. I think that's extremely important that you're coming in like, hey, look, I don't have a set term that I'm going to be, you know, I don't know. I like that a lot. I also want to talk about, you know, I am a recovering addict and I've seen, you know, a lot of misunderstanding with mental health and then law enforcement, if you will. And I want to, you know, kind of have you go into like how we're going to combat crime with drug-related offenses and what your take is on that.
Well, my take is something we alluded to earlier, in that we used to call police officers officers of the peace, but we don't call them that anymore. We call them law enforcement officers. And I think that was as a result of a couple of things that started in the 90s where we thought we would be tough on crime as a way to solve our problems.
Right.
But what that really means is that you're tough on people that you call criminals. You know, my job as sheriff is to protect us from each other, not to necessarily protect you from yourself. But I need to set the conditions so that, well, just think about it this way. You know, if you're using drugs, your life is hard enough that me locking you in a cage is not going to make it any easier. Now, people will say that the biggest problem is drugs in Washington Parish. But what they really mean, well, let me put it this way. It affects different parts of the parish differently. So when you say drugs is the problem and you're talking about Bogalusa, well, people are concerned about the violence that's going on in Bogalusa. When you're in Pine or Mount Hermon and you're saying drugs is the problem, what you're really talking about is the property crimes that are associated with people trying to feed their habit, or you're talking about the overdoses because you may have a family member that's involved in the drugs.
Right.
So how you approach each of those things has got to be a more nuanced approach than just saying, well, we're going to lock them in a cage. Because then the taxpayers are picking up the cost of their lifestyle decisions.
Well, also the mental health issue, right? So how are we addressing that?
Well, that doesn't address it. The way we're dealing with it now doesn't address it at all.
Right.
Now, there are people and a couple of organizations that I'll mention here on the air that are dealing with this in a far more productive way. I met last year a guy named Mel Jones. He's a pastor in Orleans Parish. He opened, several years ago, he opened up a men's ministry where he was a former addict himself. He was essentially bringing guys in. He owns, I don't know, 4 or 5 businesses, and gave them a safe place to go where they could work through their recovery, start to learn some life skills, and kind of get their life back on track. There's an organization in Hancock County that does the same thing for women called Magdalene House.
Oh, wow.
These are organizations that don't take any governmental money, but they will accept. I think Hancock County, their judges are at least able to give women the option of going into these programs. But those are the ones that we'll see. You don't see the recidivism. I mean, you'll have people that fall off the wagon. In fact, Mel Jones has got an interesting story because he's actually expanded his ministry now to include women, because the guys that were in the program became concerned about the women in their lives, because they knew they were struggling and there was nobody there. You know, they were in unsafe situations, they were making poor lifestyle choices, and they want the best for them as well. So now he's bought a retreat center out in Kill, Mississippi. He's got a farm out there where they're, you know, doing things on their own, and it's just it's therapeutic. It's beneficial. It's productive. It's the types of things that we ought to be looking to do in Washington Parish if we're serious about making a stable, safe community.
Well, another thing, too, is the lack of CIT training that I've noticed within the law enforcement community. Is that going to be a thing, or, like, you know?
Well, the problem that when you're focused on changing the culture, we've expanded. it's interesting. In one ways, we've narrowed the focus of police officers by calling them law enforcement officers. But in the other sense, we've expanded their roles and responsibilities. I attended a 3-day police de-escalation conference in the village of Tangipahoa just last week. And one of the things that the law enforcement guys that attended talked about was this expanse of their responsibilities. But the very evident thing was that they're not training for the things that they deal with on a daily basis. The tendency is to train for these high risk, low frequency events.
Right.
Like you'll put 400 rounds downrange, or you'll train for mass shooter events, or you'll train for all these things. But the things that police officers typically deal with, mental illness,
right,
day-to-day stuff, they're not training for. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But there's money available for the things that you make a priority.
Right.
You know, we spend a lot of money on things that should not be a priority here in Washington Parish.
Let me ask you, a high arrest rate in Washington Parish?
Yeah, well, that's the
Jail's
other
full,
thing.
anything like that?
Yeah, the jail is in excess capacity. So I think it was built for 144 inmates. We're currently well over 200.
What?
Yeah, I think if more people were aware of the conditions within the jail in Washington Parish, they'd be appalled. It's horrendous what's going on. In fact, I'm actually going to Hancock County in a couple weeks to tour the facility over there, because it's going to be an example of what a small type of community can do. The jail is safe, it's clean, it's well maintained. It's an example of what we could have in Washington Parish if we make it a priority.
Right. So if you were elected sheriff, then you would want to like lower the population of the jail currently. And some people might say, hey, you got a farm, like farm work as prison reform or something. Would you have them on at your farm there, do a little work? I don't know.
Well, so that is part of the problem, is that the sheriff is not responsible for the physical structure of the jail. So the parish government is responsible for the physical structure of the jail. They're responsible for the medical care of the inmates. They're responsible for housing the inmates or feeding the inmates. So you've got different parts of the government that are kind of working at cross purposes. The sheriff's department doesn't pay for any of that stuff. They actually can receive money for some of the prisoners that they house within the jail. The problem is that we as taxpayers in Washington Parish spend almost $750,000 to house and maintain the inmates in the jail. But because this other part of the government, the sheriff's department, is incentivized to keep a full jail, we as the taxpayers are picking up the tab of all that. And the parish, the taxpayers of the parish, because we can't print our own money at the local level like the national government can. This has all got to come from somewhere. So we're paying for this system where you've got two parts of the government that are working against each other. The sheriff is really the person that's in best position to kind of work out all these relationships, to get some of these things solved. Because it's not his primary responsibility to build or create a new jail. But he's got to work with a lot of other people to get it on board. We just got to get all pointed in the same direction.
But he gets more money, are you saying, for his office to keep that jail full or overflowing?
That's right.
Right. Wow. Okay. So incentivized. That's one thing. I mean, how do you dispel that? That's so almost now ensconced in Louisiana culture.
No, and I think that's a good point. It's like, this is not specific to Washington Parish. Like, we don't have a monopoly on this. We have been incentivized across the country to increase the size of our prison populations, and it's obviously not working. We lock up a lot of people in Washington Parish. The security situation is not getting any better as a result of it. So the solution to the problem cannot be more law enforcement. We don't need to enforce more laws. We need to change the lens at which we're looking through the world. We need to change the perspective. We need to change the culture.
You're listening to the voice of Jason Smith. He is running for sheriff in Washington Parish. I know you want to see change. You currently, I mean, you've had quite a career change. You were a Marine. You went to Fallujah. You came back to Washington Parish, and now you're a farmer. Okay.
Yes.
Again, I love this story. So you deal in beef, Angus beef, right?
And lamb.
And you and the sheriff currently have beef, right? So there was a little. Something.
No, we don't actually. You know.
But didn't he sue you?
Yes, we were sued for failure to collect sales tax. Right at the.
When you say we were sued, you're Angus. What was it? The name of your company?
Well, so the funny thing is that it wasn't. I was not sued for selling meat. My family was sued because I was selling meat. So named in the suit was when I moved back to Washington Parish, we broke apart the historical family farm into a separate LLC because I was going to sell meat under a trade name, Smith Angus.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was listed as a board member on the historical family farm, I was sued along with my father, my mother, my sister that lives in Delaware, my brother that lives in Texas.
Wow, they get everybody?
They got everybody,
Okay.
even though I was the only one that was selling meat. And so in Louisiana, and it's important for everyone to understand this, is that in Louisiana, under Louisiana statute, farm products sold from the farm by the producer are exempt from sales tax. And the reason is because Louisiana is trying to protect family farms from going the way of the dinosaur.
Right. You would think so.
You would think so.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things that we have to offer is this, the rural lifestyle and this resilience when it comes to food security. Now, Mike Strain has expanded that with his Certified Louisiana program. Basically trying to give small producers an avenue to market. So, there's a plug for the Certified Louisiana program.
I didn't realize Strain was behind that. That's good. I like him. He's a good guy.
No, so he actually factors into this story. So toward the end of 21, I got served with papers that I owed $40,000 in back taxes and penalties because we were not collecting sales tax on a farm product sold from the farm.
And this was the current sheriff suing you.
This was the current sheriff. Now, I thought originally that it was just one part of the government not talking to the other part of the government. I thought it was a mistake. I hired an attorney to kind of sort this out, and I was told, nope, they're dead set on taking it to court. So it stretched out for, 10 months. I was not going to settle. I went to court. I testified. I was the only person that testified. My father, I think he testified for just a minute just to clarify some information, but I was the only one on the witness stand, and I spent a lot of time answering questions about how many trips a month we make to the slaughterhouse and how many cows we have and a bunch of things that really never addressed the central issue, which is what we're doing selling a farm product from the farm, or is it not? And if it's not, what else is it? It was never once answered. Yeah. The judge quickly agreed with us. It took him very little time to decide, even though the court case got held, or the decision got held up in, the government bureaucracy. But in that time, we got a lot of publicity on the front page of the Times-Picayune and the Advocate in Baton Rouge. Because it is an interesting story. You've got a former Marine, comes back, tries to run a family farm, and gets sued for following the law. I became kind of a therapist for a lot of people that called me, messaged me, emailed me, Facebook messaged me about...
A therapist? So this was happening to other people?
This was happening to an enormous amount of people.
Wow.
And so then people start saying, well, listen, we need to change this. Because when I moved back in 2016, my goal was just never leave the farm. If I never made it to Franklinton, I'd have been fine. I just wanted to be left alone. But then you start hearing all these stories, people telling you their version of your story, and you think, this is not the place I chose to move my family and raise my kids. We've got to do something different than this. It should not be that a small farm is being shaken down by a politician that just wants a cut of tax revenue that's not his to begin with.
Very good.
You can't tell me that you're doing it on behalf of the taxpayers because I'm a taxpayer. My customers are taxpayers.
Right. Yeah. And again, I guess it falls back to the original intent and purpose of sheriffs is to be tax collector. Look, hey, even going back to Robin Hood, right? So let me ask you this final question: who on earth would want the job of sheriff of Washington Parish?
Well, it's funny because my wife asked me that when I first thought about this. But the good thing is that as a Marine, you very often are given jobs that you do not want to do. In fact, some of the best jobs, in retrospect, were jobs that I did not want to do in the first place. It's not about what you want; it's about what you can offer. And in this sense, I've got a lot to offer, and I think we've got an opportunity to change things for the better.
Okay. Does your wife outrank you? That's my question.
No question she does.
Good.
No question.
Good answer.
Well, Jason Smith, again, what's your website people can go to right now if they need more information?
Yep, sheriffjasonsmith.com. You can find us on the web and on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming in today. Well, now, we actually had him, so go back and listen to the podcast, all right? So the podcast is going to be uploaded to catcountry989.com. You'll actually hear the first part of this interview. This is actually, he came in too early. He's a Marine, damn it. He was doing reconnaissance.
That's right.
So he came in and he was just scoping the place out. He probably was across the street, looking through his binoculars at us, just making sure everything was cool. And it was. And the interview is great, so it's going to be on the record at catcountry989.com. Look in the upper left-hand drop screen for the podcast section. But he did come in at about 7:30. And now we're kind of out here at 8:15. So that's the time, 45 minutes that we allot to any of his, competition, the incumbent sheriff as well. All the candidates are welcome here. And again, you are open. I just want you to state this again publicly. You're open to the idea of an on-air live debate.
Anytime, anywhere.
Okay, there you have it. You heard it here first, folks. Jason Smith, best of luck to you running for sheriff in Washington Parish. Okay, so Jordan, we got to go. We do have some news we got to get to today at some point. You're getting off easy today, man.
I don't know. I got some stuff I really want to talk about.
Okay, very good. Stay tuned. Check out that podcast at catcountry989.com. We'll be right back.